Hi guys, welcome to Adrian's Digital Basement. In my previous video, which I'll link in the description below, we took a look at my IBM 5150. I've had this computer since 2017, and recently when I went to turn it on, a tantalum capacitor went bad, which shorted the 12-volt rail to ground. That prevented the computer from working at all, so in that last video I took it apart and I fixed it. Since I had the computer out to work on it, I figured it was a good time to actually clean it up a little bit and also change it up to make it more like how I want a 5150 to be. But first, a little history. Let's go back in time to July 2017 when I bought this computer.
I found the machine on Craigslist for $100. After chatting with the seller, we settled on $80. The seller, who was an elderly man, told me he had owned the computer since new. I didn't know much about the 5150 at the time, but I later found out this was a very early Rev A machine. Based on the chip's date codes, the machine appears to date from the end of 1981, only about 4 months after the machine was released. I was just 6 years old at the time when this machine was made. That's amazing. The computer had sat in the original owner's damp garage since he stopped using it around 1988. I could tell the date by the timestamps on the files on the hard drive. The dampness definitely had taken its toll on the chassis and case and caused quite a bit of rust. I had also found that lots of bugs had set up shop inside the machine, requiring lots of cleaning. Of course, I hadn't yet seen the Left 4 Dead Commodore 64 that was found in a field, which was obviously a lot worse than this machine. Once I had taken care of the rust, bugs, and filth, I tested the machine and I found it powered on, but it had some errors. The 5150 is notorious for showing as little information as possible at boot time. You are normally just greeted with a flashing cursor while you wait for it to do the boot time diagnostics, and any error codes will pop up at that point if there are any. The error codes pointed me to bad RAM. After some troubleshooting and helps from the folks at VC Fed, I found that a few chips were bad, a couple on the motherboard, and some on the expansion card. With that squared away, the computer was now booting and working properly.
Okay, so let's go over what I got with this machine when I first got it, because right now we're looking at the machine after I've already worked on it. So from an exterior perspective, the machine came with the Model F keyboard, the computer itself, and this original IBM 5150 monochrome monitor. This CJ monitor here, which is an IBM 5153, came with a IBM PC XT I bought later. On the inside, the configuration is quite a bit different to how the machine would have actually originally been sold. This floppy drive on the left is the floppy drive that came with this computer. This is a double-sided 360K floppy drive without an IBM brand on it. Now, information is scarce, but back when this computer was first sold, it came with a single-sided floppy drive with about 160K of capacity. Sometime in early to mid-1982, IBM switched to a double-sided drive as well, but since this computer dates back to 1981, this computer would have had the original single-sided drive. This machine also has the 1982 BIOS in it, which I think was required to support the double-sided drives. At some point in the mid-80s, the owner upgraded this computer with a hard drive. This is the hard drive controller that came with the computer, which is a PC Limited ZM2. Now I'm just going off the sticker on the EEPROM here, because there's really very little information I can actually find about this controller. All I do know is it's an MFM dual drive controller with built-in floppy support. The date codes on the chips all date this to around 1985, which does coincide with the release date of the hard drive which was in this computer, which is this Tandon TM262. This is a 20 megabyte MFM hard drive, 3.5 inch half-height drive, which is how we got a hard drive working inside this computer, considering the meager power output of 63 watts of the built-in IBM 5150 power supply. I can't find any documentation on this hard drive controller, including any way to configure these jumpers, but it does work with this hard drive out of the box. And if you can believe it, this hard drive actually still works perfectly. I did have to lubricate the stepper motor here, and I have a previous video which I'll link to in the description below on how I repair these drives using a little bit of lubricant. For driving the original IBM 5150 monochrome monitor, The original owner at some point replaced the original IBM monochrome card with this CCS monochrome display adapter. Looking at the date codes on this card, it appears to date back to around 1983. So I wonder if his original card failed and then he used this to replace it, or perhaps this was some kind of an upgrade. I'm unable to find any documentation on this card, so I don't really know if this was an upgrade or just a replacement. But if you notice here there are two headers where the RAM is, this probably has dual-ported RAM and maybe a RAM expansion capability that gave this monochrome graphics capabilities, perhaps Hercules compatible. But I do know that in its state right now, this does not have any graphics capabilities that I can figure out, and Hercules applications do not work on it. Because the owner had a single floppy drive and then the half-height hard drive, there was actually a hole here in the front where there was no drive. So I used that as an opportunity to take a Gotek, this Gotek actually, and install it inside the computer, which actually allowed me to get files on and off the machine much more easily. Another card inside the machine is a fully populated AST Mega Plus 2 expansion card. This has chips that data from late 1982, which means it was probably a pretty early upgrade for this machine. I can't imagine how much a fully populated card cost because RAM was very expensive, and fully populated this card has 512K, 256 on the card itself, and 256 on the Mega Pack expansion card. In addition to RAM expansion, this card also adds a parallel port, 2 serial ports, and a real-time clock. Using this card brings the computer to the maximum supported RAM configuration of 576K, which is 64K on the motherboard, plus 512K on the expansion card. So I wanted to start with the display options. So you currently see I'm running Ultima 4 Quest of the Avatar on a CGA monitor. This is a 5131 as I said before. CGA can do 16 colors in text mode, but in graphics mode you can just do 4 colors. And it outputs at a 15.7 kilohertz, so it's essentially NTSC output, but it's RGB. But check this out. Here we have the same game Ultima 4, which is a CGA only game, running on my monochrome screen. I turned off the light because there was a lot of glare on this CRT. Let me zoom in and give you a closer look. So it looks quite good, as you can see here. This is a bone stock IBM 5151 monitor, no trickery going on, and I'm not running any special software to, say, emulate CGA. This is running at the full native speed and whatever capabilities of CGA, but there's actually a little more coolness to this. Let me show you something else. Alright, it's a little hard to see because we're zoomed out, but I'm going to zoom in and show you something that's really interesting, at least to me. Okay, so this is my monitor here, and you have to excuse the flicker. But one thing that's interesting about monochrome monitors is the IBM monochrome monitor standard allows 3 colors: black, white, and bright white. This is a digital TTL monitor, but as you can see here, we have actual shades of gray. And what this is showing is the color palette of CGA's colors 0 through 15. And look, there's actually different shades. And if I turn the contrast up and down, it's affecting the top half here, which is the dim version, not the intense version. And the bottom has the intensity bit set. So the graphics card I'm using, which I'm going to show you in a second, not only does it emulate CGA, as you saw me running Ultima 5, but it emulates the colors on a monochrome screen, and it shows them in somehow these gray tones. Well, green, because that's what the CRT is, but it shows gray. And to my eyes, there's absolutely no flicker. It's a rock-solid image, and I can see clearly defined different shades of gray here represented by each of the 16 colors. I personally had never seen anything like this before. I knew of CGA emulation, for instance using a Hercules card, and that would allow you to run CGA on a monochrome monitor like this. But I have never seen shades of gray on a monochrome monitor. So interesting is that when it's running in CGA emulation mode like here, the font is actually rather chunky. And it doesn't look so great in text mode, and like you see the tops of the 5s have a thin line and the rest look thick. And that's because CGA is 640 by 200 resolution, but the monochrome video standard is actually 640 by 350. So this graphics card has to stretch the text mode so that it takes up the entire screen, but you get a little bit of pixels that look weird because of that stretching.
But when it runs in the graphics mode, like you saw Ultima, it's actually just running in 640 by 200, and you have a black bar at the top and the bottom where those extra pixels are. So it's not stretching the graphics mode. Those look correct. But I can switch on the fly between color mode and monochrome by typing mode, mono. Now we are running in the actual proper monochrome mode. So if you notice, the font is nice and sharp there. And we have Hercules graphics emulation right now. So that's the full native resolution, but in black and white. But if I type mode CO80 or CO40 for 40 column, but we're going to do 80 column, it switches back into that CGA mode. And in this mode, we have all of the graphics capabilities of CGA, all of the color modes, full emulation of CGA in this mode, and it completely outputs natively to this CRT. So here at the back of the computer, even more cool if you ask me, is I have rigged up a toggle switch here that switches between monochrome and CGA mode. So when the switch is in the up position, we're in monochrome, and when I switch it down, we are in CGA. Now I do have to power cycle the computer to get this to take effect, but this actually switches between the two modes, so all I need to do to change monitors is unplug it from the video card like that, and plug in the CGA monitor, and then flick the switch, power cycle the computer, and we are now running in full color mode. Here I'm running Deskmate in full Hercules mode, which looks really nice and sharp on this monochrome monitor. Alright, so let me open this computer up and I'm going to show you what makes this graphics switching possible, and also the other things I've done to this computer. Actually, before we pop the cover, I just want to talk about the exterior condition of this computer a little bit. Now when I got it, it was in pretty good shape, but I mentioned earlier that there were some rust issues. Those were on the inside of the chassis, but they didn't stop. There was a bit of rust issues on the outside as well. Now besides the rust, there are little bits of missing paint, like on the plastic here, just little scratches. I could probably fix that with touch-up paint, but I've chosen to leave it. But the front of the computer is actually in pretty fantastic shape. On the other hand, this side of the computer was in really, really bad shape. So the power switch is fine, there's no issues there, but there was a lot of rust on this side of the computer. Now I treated it with my rust remover technique, and this is where I use wheel cleaner. I'll link to the video in the description below, you'll see how I did it. And while I can see little rust marks, it is a million times better. I've zoomed up a little bit to see if I could show them to you on camera, but there's a little mark there. There's just sort of little speckles of marks all across this. But it's pretty amazing nonetheless how this turned out, and I'm very happy with that. Switching to the back of the computer, there's not much to report here. There was a lot of rust on the back of the case, especially around the slots here. So I have repainted this. I used Rust-Oleum rust converter, and then I painted it with this flat black paint. But I was very careful to kind of preserve the labels, so the IBM label on this, plus the barcode and these stickers here. So this is what shows us that this is an early Rev A because it has this DB25 connector here. And I'm very happy with how this came out, considering I'm terrible at using spray paint. This side of the computer is actually fine. There was no issues with it whatsoever. There's no scratches and there was no rust. So the top of the case has some battle scars. And you see these scratches up along the edge here. These are actually down to the bare metal. The few of them are. So these were all rusting as well when I got the case. But when I did the rust removal process for the rust on the side of the case, it took care of this as well. Alright, so here we are with the top cover removed. So right off the bat, you probably noticed already from earlier shots that I have two 5¼ inch disk drives in this computer again. Now the drive I got with this computer originally was this one. So it's a 360K double-sided drive. Now I luckily found another drive in one of my other computers that's actually an IBM branded drive. So if we look here, if you can see there's an IBM logo there. Hopefully that comes out in the camera. But the drive on the right is actually an original IBM. It's a 360K. You can tell 360K drives because there are two connections for the head assembly. Both of these have this. But I was able to find this original IBM drive, which I took out of the other computer and I put into this machine. So I restored this to a much closer to the original 5150 configuration, at least from a floppy drive configuration. I know it would be period correct to put two single-sided drives in, and I do have two single-sided drives, but that's just way too limiting. I mean, I might need to copy a file onto this or something, and you can barely work with those drives that small. So there we go, two double-sided drives. So let's talk about the peripheral cards. Now, I showed you what this computer came with originally, and one of those cards is still in this computer, this one right here. So this is the AST Mega Plus 2 with the Mega Pack RAM expansion. So this is the card that has $1,000 of 1982 memory. I am just floored that this card works properly. And yeah, so this is definitely staying in this computer. It has a new battery in here, so the clock keeps good time. I have a serial port that I can access here, so I can plug a mouse or a modem into it. I don't use the parallel port because that's on the graphics card, but this thing is a pretty kick-ass card. So if we're looking back at the disk drives again, so the 2 disk drives, I wanted to get a little closer to how we originally were with this machine. So what I was able to find is an original IBM dual floppy controller card. So this is a bit different than newer cards because if you notice here it has an edge connector, and luckily I have the original cable that goes with this. The original cable actually was already folded in the correct configuration for this chassis. Now this is the later card, if you are familiar with these cards, the ones that would have come in this machine, well early on at least, would have had slightly different looking arrangement down here. But looking at the date codes on these chips, this is from 1984, this board. So this is a little bit later than this machine. This came out of a 5160 in XT, but to me it's close enough. And look, it even has this giant external floppy drive connector. I mean, I guess probably that was used on the XT. If you had an internal hard drive and you had one floppy drive, you needed a second floppy drive, you had to plug some ridiculous external chassis into here. Now I alluded to this earlier, and you might have seen something on the boot up screen, but this is an Intel network card. Now of course it's a much later card here. We're talking about an Intel 816 LAN adapter. It has an AUI port, but it has 10 base T. It doesn't even have coax. And yes, it's a 16-bit ISA card. This card works fantastically in this computer because first off, even though it's 16-bit, this card is fallback to 8-bit operation, and you use the soft set utility to control all the settings like the base IO. This does no jumpers, if you notice. That is all configured through software, and this card works great. And what I use this for is I use it with the network stack called MTCP. It's a DOS-based TCP IP stack, and it allows me to FTP files on and off this computer. But even better is I can telnet directly to BBSs through this card. So I highly recommend, if you have one of these old computers, find some of these old network cards. 3coms does work as well, but a lot of these old Intel cards absolutely work perfectly in 8-bit operation. And luckily, this slot that I had it in doesn't interfere. The little extra 16-bit thing does not interfere with any chips. There happens to be a missing IC right there on the motherboard. So when I plug this in, it just goes straight into the slot with no issues. So this card here, which is a little hard to see because of the angle, this is my next card, and I'm going to pull this out here. Now, there's nothing special about this. This is a XT-IDE type card, but it's called an XT-CF, as in it supports a compact flash card directly. But these are fantastic. I got this in kit form. This is an XT-CF Lite, I think version 4, and as you can see, the card just connects like that. This is missing the back slot cover, so I don't have that. It didn't come with the kit. And the compact flash card sticks through the back of the case. So I have one tip about this card and a problem I ran into with this computer. So originally when I built this kit and I was configuring it, I had it in a Pentium computer. And I was using this compact flash card right here, or one just like this. It's an InnoDisk ICF 9000. This is an industrial compact flash card. It's 4 gigabytes in size, and these I found to be really reliable and work really well. But for whatever reason, when this was in this card, this worked perfectly. This combo worked perfectly inside the Pentium computer. But when I took this adapter card with that slot, this compact flash, and I put it in here, I had nothing but problems. Right off the bat, if I tried to write to this compact flash card, it would lock up and the entire computer would freeze. And if I Control-Deleted, it wouldn't even find the card anymore. I had to literally power cycle the computer. A little tip is if you're trying to use these XT-CF cards and you're having issues where it's just not working reliably, try a different brand. I wouldn't have thought this would have worked, but sure enough, this card here, which incidentally is this called a One Favor, a very inexpensive Chinese one I bought. It's an industrial card as well. I got it off eBay. But sure enough, this card in here works perfectly. Alright, so here is my graphics card, and as you can see here, there's the toggle switch, and I have it on a little slot cover that I just snipped off, and then I drilled a hole with my drill press, and that's the toggle switch. So, like I said, this is the graphics card, and there's nothing particularly special about this. I found this at a store locally in Portland here, and it was just a few bucks. And what it is just sort of a Taiwanese
clone CGA slash monochrome card. So as you can see here, there's pretty much nothing going on. There's the main IC here, there's probably 2 RAM chips, and then there's some kind of a glue logic here for talking to the bus, and that's it. It obviously has support for external character generator ROM. So the card itself has no markings to show what kind of brand it is, but the chip, the main chip obviously does, HMC HM6111Q. And when I Google that, I do find some information on it. So this is the paper that came with it, and sorry for the glare, but yep, MP6311 monocolor graphics adapter. And it's got quite a few jumpers, JP1 through 10, but if we look down here, it actually does explain how to get things working, but it's not always super clear to me how to make things work. I mean, monocolor, auto switching enabled or disabled, character ROM. I mean, there's a lot of settings and some of it just doesn't quite make sense. And remember the whole emulation thing I was showing you where it was running in CGA mode? Well, that doesn't work always if you don't have these configured exactly right. It will run in monochrome mode, but to have no graphics capability, well, it will have Hercules, but no CGA emulation. So you got to get this exactly right. So what I did is I figured out exactly how I had to have it configured, and this took a while just to try every possible setting. So to run in full CGA mode, I got to have the jumpers for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 on and 9 not on. And to have mono but with CGA emulation, I just need to have 5, 6, and 8 on. So essentially these 3 are off that are on for CGA. And that is how I got the switch hooked up to go between the 2 modes. So I took a toggle switch and I ran it to a little harness here that allows me to basically select and deselect the jumpers on the fly. And it looks a little bit messy, but essentially the way this card works is the top row of pins are all common together and they're just ground. And the second on the bottom row, those are the inputs probably to the main IC here. So essentially I have one pin right here, this one, connected to the top row, and that's what goes to the toggle switch. And then on the bottom, I have 3 pins connected. Now one of them is missing the little plastic, but it's on there. If you find one of these are the cards that can not only emulate CGA on monochrome natively in the silicon, but it does that grayscale thing with the monochrome monitor as well. So there we go. That's how this computer is configured right now. Otherwise, the motherboard is all the same as it was. It just got the 64K of RAM. I haven't touched it at all other than fixing that capacitor. The computer works well, and let's put this back together. And it works. Sweet. Not broken. So let me show you a few things that I'm doing on the computer. So I do have a date time that works. So if we look at the date, so it's, I guess this computer is Y2K compliant. I don't know, but it does seem to work. I'm using the clock utility by this guy. Oh, it's just called Clock. So Clock, David Muttimer, I think. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. But if we do clock and T, let's see if it's going to tell us what kind of clock I have. Ah yes, there it is, MM58167. That's the actual clock chip, and there's the base I/O. That is not configurable on this ASD card, it's just set always to that. You may have noticed here on my auto exec is I have here type network to start networking stack. So I just wrote a batch file that's called network.bat, which runs the network stack, and if I run this, what it will do is it loads the packet driver first for the Intel EtherExpress 16, and then it runs the DHCP driver for MTCP, which is what's going on right here. MTCP comes with a whole suite of commands like FTP servers and Telnet and various clients. There's even an IRC client. But one of the coolest one is the Telnet client. So for BBSing, I use this site called telnetbbsguide.com. It's got all sorts of interesting BBSs on here, but we're going to try this one right here called Alcoholiday BBS, and the address is alco.bbs.io. So let's give that a try. Telnet alco.bbs.io. And this takes a moment.
There we are, we're connected. Detected ANSI detection automatically, and look at that! It's not super smooth the way it's scrolling. Be nice if it kind of emulated the 4800 bits per second or 2400 bits per second so we could see this draw a little nicer. But there it is. That looks absolutely fantastic. You just can't beat the CGA experience when it comes to BBSing. And I did a lot of BBSing when I was a kid, and I just have such a soft spot in my heart for the way this PC character set renders with the colors and everything. It's just a joy to behold. It looks gorgeous to me. So here we are at the West Gate. I don't have an account on this BBS. I think I hit enter. And yes, it says, ask, you shall receive. Seek, and you shall find. Knock, it shall be open to you. Pause, press a key to continue. So there's one more fun thing I want to show you. So when you're dealing with XT-IDE, that's the BIOS that's on that little card with the compact flash. Now watch this. If I hit Control-Delete, it will show a little boot screen up here. And if I push F8 for ROM boot, see that's highlighted? Look what happens. It boots into the original basic 10 print. IBM made a fantastic computer. There we go. 20, go to 10, run. Oops, not ruin. Run. There it is. Well, there you go. I hope you guys enjoyed my video on the PC 5150. I absolutely love this computer. This thing is a joy to use for me, especially for the fact that I am only a few years older than this computer. I just love this thing, and playing these old games, this is the old original Q*bert, you can't beat it. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I'd love to hear your comments, and put any questions you have in the comment section below. Thank you for watching, and look forward to new videos. You can subscribe, and you'll see them come up in your feed. Thanks for watching. Bye!